It might seem hard to imagine it today, but there was a time, actually wasn't even so long ago, when rabbis spoke publicly only 2 days a year. That was it, just twice a year. No sermon given during the high holy days, so no sermon on Kol Nidre or Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah. No Shabbat sermons given, no Friday night sermons, no Saturday morning sermons. In fact, in those days, eulogies were rarely given. Only if a very important member of the community passed away was a eulogy given back in those days. It was just twice a year when rabbis would speak. They would speak on Shabbat HaGadol, which is the Shabbos before Passover. On that Shabbat, usually talking about the laws of kashrut for the holiday. And then they would speak on this Shabbos, Shabbat Shuvah, the Shabbos between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And on this Shabbos, usually speak about teshuvah. What's the process of repentance? How are we supposed to do that? But think for a moment, given that, about the contrast rabbis' responsibilities back then and rabbis' responsibilities now. It's almost been like a 180-degree turn. And you could argue that if today's rabbinate is defined by anything, it's defined by public speaking. Of course, the rabbi is expected to give a sermon week in and week out. Some rabbis have to speak both every Friday night and every Saturday morning as well. If there's a board meeting, the rabbi is often expected to give a little Devar Torah as an introduction to the board meeting. At life cycle events, rabbis are expected to speak. Of course, eulogies given at funerals, but also rabbis speak at weddings and maybe say a few words at a bris or a baby naming as well. And not only is the rabbi expected to give the high holy day sermons today, the sermons are supposed to be, great and brilliant, and the whole congregation comes. I mean, we have to give people something to talk about during their Rosh Hashanah lunches, right? So, I mean, just the fact that, this is true, literally dozens and dozens of times in the weeks leading up to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, I am asked by people if I have finished my sermons yet. Dozens and dozens of times. That always makes me nervous because, of course, the answer is always no, I haven't finished my sermons. Did you ever wonder how rabbis feel about that? How rabbis feel about that? So Rabbi Mark Loeb, of blessed memory, as many of you know, was a master orator. He had not only a natural talent for it, but I would say a true gift for public speaking, but also it was the aspect of his rabbinate I think that he loved the most, that he cherished the most. And he was a rabbi, who never wanted to have anyone else speak from his pulpit. Right? The only people that spoke from his pulpit, you remember the pulpit was right here, big, large, and he would speak, and the assistant rabbis in the congregation would speak, and that was it. In all the time that I served the congregation while Rabbi Loeb was here, I can remember only 2 other times that he invited someone else to speak from that pulpit. That was it. In contrast to that, Rabbi Joel Zaman, also of blessed memory, who, as many of you know, was the rabbi at Chizuk Emunah congregation for many, many years. Rabbi Zaman, brilliant, also a wonderful speaker, but he just didn't feel that public speaking was his favorite part of the rabbinate. It just wasn't his favorite thing to do. And he regularly invited other people to speak from the pulpit at Chizuk Emunah. I remember a Shabbos morning where a cousin's son of mine was having a bar mitzvah over at Chizuk, and so Joel Zaman, Rabbi Zaman, calls me up, and he said, listen, you're going to be here, it's your cousin, why don't you give the sermon? And he said, I said, okay, and so I go to Rabbi Loeb. I said, Rabbi Loeb, I've been invited over to Chizuk Emunah, I'm going to be there. He said, okay, come here first, do the Shacharit service here at Beth El, and then go over to Chizuk. And I think it's the only time a rabbi ever did part of the service at Beth El and gave the sermon at Chizuk Emunah, as far as I know. But the truth is, most rabbis are somewhere probably in the middle between Rabbi Loeb's approach to speaking and Rabbi Zaman's approach to it. I can tell you that the single best piece of advice that I have ever been given about the rabbinate came from Rabbi Harold Kushner of book fame, When Bad Things Happen to Good People. And he said this, he said, I've given many wonderful sermons And he was an amazing, amazing sermonizer, actually. He said, I've given many wonderful sermons. For the most part, it never really changed anybody's life. And he said, I've given plenty of lousy sermons, and it never put anybody in the hospital, he said. And honestly, that statement has been a great source of comfort to me over the years, especially on occasions where I step up to the pulpit needing to say something and feeling that what I have to say is just not particularly up to snuff. I mean, it happens, right? It happens to everybody. And I think rabbis who are being candid would admit to you that there is a certain fear factor involved in public speaking. Now, that's not what you might be thinking. It's not the fear of speaking in front of people. I mean, that is something in this particular job you get used to very, very quickly. So it's not a fear of speaking per se. It's more a fear of saying something that is wrong or that might be misinterpreted when you are speaking. And that's gotten more and more intense, I would say, over the last 10 to 15 years. There's always a worry in the back of your mind that you might call someone by the wrong name, whether at a funeral or at a wedding or a bris or a baby naming. There are days when, as rabbis, we have multiple life cycle events. I could go from a funeral to an unveiling to a wedding. It happened many, many times. And I'm always in the back of my mind saying, oh my, God forbid if at the wedding I mention the funeral person's name, or hasn't happened yet, but it's something, and thank God for sticky notes, right? That's exactly what. So there is this worry that you might say something that could be misunderstood. You may be trying to make point X, right? And someone's listening to you, and for whatever reason, maybe it's your fault, maybe it's their fault, they don't hear X, they hear you saying Y. I'm reading, just actually finished yesterday, a new book. It's a new biography of Jerry Garcia. Why is that funny? I don't know. So it's a wonderful book, actually. I recommend it, not only about Garcia's life, but about sort of the historical context of the period where he kind of came of age, the counterculture, and the Bay Area, San Francisco scene, and all of that. Garcia, as you probably know, was the lead guitarist in the Grateful Dead. He almost never, ever said anything from the stage. I mean, like not even one word from the stage. And it wasn't that he wasn't articulate. He was a very articulate guy, wonderful conversationalist, one-on-one, very, very bright, gave fascinating interviews, but from the stage, nothing. He never said, hello, how are you? He never said, thank you. In all the years, all the Grateful Dead concerts that I saw, I don't think I heard Garcia say more than 2 or 3 words, literally, the whole, and I saw the Grateful Dead 126 times, okay? A reporter once asked him about that and said, Jerry, why don't you speak? Why don't you ever say anything from the stage? And I thought his response was interesting and telling also. He said, people have put me up on such a pedestal. I'm afraid if I say anything, they'll take it too seriously. Those are words rabbis probably have in the backs of their minds. And I would say if they don't, they should. Okay? And Garcia's observation also is probably not a bad one for all of us to keep in mind, whether rabbi or not, and maybe particularly at this time of year. Hizaru b'divreichem, says in the Talmud. Be careful when you use words. Be careful when you use words. What we say publicly, for sure, but I would argue in some ways even more importantly, privately, is often taken quite seriously. You know the old children's rhyme, right? I don't have to tell it to you. We all learned it in elementary school. Sticks and stones will break my bones. Go ahead. But names will never hurt me. But the opposite is true. Like if you think about it, it's actually the opposite that's true, because a bruise heals up like a broken bone. In 6 weeks, you're back out and you're doing whatever you want to do. But a hurtful word can stay with you for a long time. I mean, I have people come to my office crying because of something someone said to them 30 years ago. It's happened many times to me. And it works from the other side of the coin as well, by the way. The kind word that someone shares with you The kind word extended at just the right moment can make all the difference in the world. Can change a whole day around for somebody, one kind word. And it can also, sometimes, every once in a while, change a whole life around. I've seen that too. What we say makes a difference. The words we speak matter. We're all familiar with the Al-Chet list. We'll be reciting it over and over again on Yom Kippur this coming week. It's composed using an alphabetical acrostic. You know what that is? They take the alphabet, and for each letter in the alphabet, a line is composed. That's how the Al-Chet list is composed. It's actually a double alphabetical acrostic. So 2 lines for each letter. 2 lines for Aleph, 2 lines for Bet, 2 lines for Gimel. Go straight through the alphabet. Anybody know how many letters in the Hebrew alphabet? 22. There are 22. So do the math. 22 times 2. 44, thank you, Eddie. So there are 44 lines in the Al-Chet. You can count them on Yom Kippur if you want, 44 lines in the Al-Chet. And 10 of those, so almost a full quarter, close to a quarter of the sins that are listed are sins of speech. Are sins of speech. Harsh language denigrates not only the one to whom it is spoken, but it also denigrates the one who says it. The speaker, the one who uses hateful language, is also brought low. But the opposite is also true. Language that is kind and thoughtful and loving and hopeful and healing lifts other people, and also, when we speak in that spirit, lifts our own souls. May we both speak and live in that spirit and for many years. Shabbat Shalom.